Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone in the US and good evening, Yerevan. Thank you for participating in this special encounter with Harut Sassounian. I met Harut for the first time 45 years ago in Geneva, Switzerland, where my wife and I spent several days hanging posters. And I remember the poster's title was "The First Genocide of the 20th Century." I mean, we did have a lot of fun doing this, but for Harut, it was serious business. It was his mission in life. He served for 10 years as a non-government delegate on human rights at the United Nations in Geneva. After the 1988 earthquake, he was in charge of the United Armenian Fund, which under the leadership of Karabagh has distributed almost $1 billion of aid to Armenia. Currently, Harut is the president of Armenia Artsakh Fund and the publisher of the California Courier. His weekly commentaries, translated in half a dozen languages, if I'm not mistaken, are published in around 200 publications and websites around the world. For the last several months, the Western media is showing us very painful images of what is going on in Ukraine. We all feel for the Ukrainian people, and we hope for a peaceful resolution as soon as possible. But at the same time, we wonder why the same media was silent when Armenian soldiers were falling in Artsakh and churches and hospitals were being targeted. Is there a connection to all of this? Just an open question. After Harut's presentation, there will be a question and answer session where you can raise your Zoom hands and address your questions directly to Harut. Some people have already sent their questions, and Harut is going to answer to those questions first. And now, without any further delay, I give you Harut Sassounian.
Thank you, Varesh, for your kind introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us in your busy schedule. I guess we'll start with Ukraine, Russia, and effects on Armenia. Let's start with that, and then we can go on from there on any other Armenian subject dealing with Turkey, genocide, Armenia, Artsakh, Azerbaijan, Russia, United States, whatever you would like to talk about. So as Varesh said, you know, our heart goes out to the people of Ukraine who are being injured and killed on a daily basis. This has nothing to do with politics. It doesn't matter what side you're on and who you support. We're just having a humanitarian approach to this. Anytime human beings suffer, no matter who they are, we're sympathetic to that, and we understand that, and we hope that the killing and the bombing and the wounding will stop. Now, in terms of the war's effect on Armenia and Artsakh, I would like to divide into two sections. First, the economic consequences on Armenia, and then secondly, the political and or military consequence. Economically, because of Western sanctions on Russia, and because Armenia is to a large degree reliant on the Russian economy, necessarily Armenia will be affected negatively by the sanctions on Russia, because Russia is the largest partner, economic partner of Armenia. So whatever happens in Russian economy, it directly affects Armenia. Let me mention a couple of specific things. As you know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not a couple of millions of Armenians living in Russia. And they all work, and most of them send money back home to their families, wives and children. So with the ruble losing most of its value, the money that these people will send to Armenia will really, the value will diminish. There'll be very little value of the money. Last year, Armenians sent to back to Armenia from Russia $860 million of foreign transfer money, and it's called remittance. It's the proper word to describe it, and that probably will be cut down minimum by half, if not more than half, and the war is not over yet. We're still going through it. So that's a large amount of money that Armenia will lose automatically. The second thing is on the economy. Since Russia is the largest trade partner to Armenia, a lot of the Armenian production is exported to Russia, and the Russian economy being affected, and Russia having less money than it usually it did previously. So Russia will not be able to afford to import what it did last year. So already imports are down quite a bit in March. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like 40% or more in 1 month. So that will continue. The third negative economic effect will be a lot of the Armenians who've gone to Russia just to get a job and make some money and send back home. Not only the money they send home will be worth much less than before, but a lot of the jobs will also disappear in Russia, which means that a lot of the Armenians, the laborers in Russia, will be forced to return to Armenia, since there are no jobs in Russia. And when they come back, that will increase automatically the unemployment in Armenia. Armenia has borrowed a lot of money, several $1 billion from European countries, Japan, from the World Bank and IFC. And the percentage of the debt, Armenia's debt to its GNP, is quite high. It's over 60%. And Armenia was trying to lower that, but now with less income coming in, the GNP going down, the percentage of foreign debt will be higher. Having said all these negative things, there's one positive thing that's happening, which is that tens of thousands of Russians, I've heard various numbers from 30,000 to 70,000, have moved to Armenia, just like they have moved to a lot of other places, some to Georgia and some to Russia, to Turkey. And also a lot of them have moved to Armenia, and Armenia is a good country for them to move, because Armenia is facilitating their move. They're getting permits, they're opening bank accounts, establishing businesses, registering their businesses. And a lot of them are high-tech people, and they've come in, with their know-how, and Armenia being a good high-tech country, but it does not have enough of high-tech people, experts. So the Russians who are moving in will be welcome, and they will generate some income to the country. That's one of the rare good points about what's going on. That's assuming that those who come in a rush to Armenia will stay in Armenia. Some have already come to Armenia and they've left to other European countries. We'll see how it ends up after a few months. The other thing I want to talk about before I get to the politics and the military aspect is there are a lot of Armenians in Ukraine, anywhere from 200,000 to 500,000. No one knows the exact number. And out of that, the last thing I heard a couple of weeks ago, that 4,000 had come to Armenia. In Ukraine, there are two types of Armenians. There's the recent migrants from Armenia after independence, and there's a very old community of Armenians. For hundreds of years, they've been living in Ukraine. So I guess the 4,000 have come mostly are the ones who just a few years ago left Armenia. They're coming back to the homeland. And the unfortunate thing is that as opposed to a lot of the European countries who are welcoming with open arms Ukrainian refugees, giving them housing, food, medicine, toys for their children, and milk, etc. I don't see any movement in Armenia by the government or anyone else welcoming this 4,000, or by now maybe more than 4,000, by providing anything to them. So these poor people, when they come and somehow find enough money to buy an airplane ticket, probably from Poland, when they make it to Poland from Ukraine, and fly to Yerevan, when they land in Yerevan airport, nobody's there to welcome them. Nobody's asking them, well, where are you going? You have no place to stay. You have no money and no medicine, no food. Some of them, of course, are with their children, with their elderly parents. It's really sad to see the difference between what the European countries are doing to welcome Ukrainians and what Armenia is doing to welcome its own people, and many of them are its own citizens. So that's the part about the economy and the social situation. Regarding the political situation and the military situation, well, naturally, Russia being very busy, engaged in the Ukrainian war, its attention is diverted from Armenia and Azerbaijan and Artsakh. So, and Azeris, of course, know this, and Turks know this. So they're going to take advantage of the situation of the Russia being busy with other things in Ukraine. And they're going to, in every way, pressure Armenia, pressure Artsakh. Already a couple of weeks ago, there were Azeri attacks on some villages in Artsakh, and it took a lot of effort on the part of Armenia, constantly complaining to Russia. Finally, they were able to get them back from most of the areas that they just came in, the Azeris, and they're still, I think there's some areas they're still sitting in. There's going to be a lot of other unfortunate developments, like Azeri military attacks on Armenia's borders. That's militarily. And politically, there's been a lot of pressure and demands on Armenia to make more concessions to Azerbaijan and Turkey. So Armenia already after the war was in a position of weakness, having suffered the devastating defeat in the war. And now with because of war in Ukraine and Russia being busy, Armenia will be really on its own. Even though, as we saw in the news, Prime Minister Pashinyan went to Moscow and signed a very long agreement with Russia, with Putin. I think it had 30 points, most of it having to do with cultural, linguistic, trade, economy, investment, things like this. There was hardly any mention of Artsakh, even though Pashinyan, before going to Moscow, he said most of his conversation would be about Artsakh, but that was not the case, because there isn't much anybody can do for Armenia and Artsakh, because Armenia basically lost, and it's not in a position to demand anything from anybody. And from Putin's point of view, not only is busy with Ukraine, he also is trying to be even-handed between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, trying to win them over, and rather than trying to antagonize them further by being one-sidedly with Armenia. So that's also not good news for Armenia. The sooner the war ends, and if Russia does not get devastated as a result, both economically and militarily, Armenia will be better off. So whatever degree they can rely on Russia to come to its protection or defense, that will be a positive thing. But the war is not still going on. It's not over, so we don't know how it's going to end. But we all have to be very careful and do everything we can to support Armenia and to criticize Azeri and Turkish encroachments on Armenia and Artsakh. Brej, I don't know if I should stop here. Do you want me to talk about the Russian peacekeepers too, or I will wait for a question on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, as you know, when the war was over on November 9, 2020, Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan signed an agreement which forced Armenia to turn over to Azerbaijan the 7 territories surrounding Artsakh, and of course Shushi and 70% of Artsakh proper, not just the surrounding areas. And we also lost several thousand soldiers who were killed and thousands of wounded soldiers and some civilians. But one of the points in the agreement was that Russia will station about 1,900 Russian peacekeepers between the Azeri and Armenian dividing line between the two in Artsakh itself. And the agreement said that those peacekeepers, Russian peacekeepers, will be there for 5 years from November 9, 2020. And it also said that if any of the two sides, Azerbaijan or Armenia, ask the Russians to leave, the peacekeepers to leave, then Russia will withdraw its peacekeepers by 2025, in 5 years. Even though a lot of people in Armenia and Artsakh are saying all sorts of things, that Russia will not withdraw, Russia, when they go in someplace, they stay, or Russia will take over Artsakh, or Artsakh people will join Russia, things like this. Regrettably, I'm not very optimistic about any of these made-up scenarios. I may be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but my personal analysis is that as we approach the 5 years, 6 months before, as the agreement calls for, Azerbaijan will ask Russians to leave Artsakh, and Russians will immediately leave. They will not stay 1 day longer than the agreement term. And once Russians leave, then Azerbaijan will take over the rest of Artsakh within 24 hours. Already there, they can't wait for the 5 years to come, let alone when the 5 years is over. They're not going to wait anymore. So that's a very alarming and dangerous situation that Armenians in Artsakh are in. And what can be done, if there's a question, what can be done about it? Well, the only thing that can be done, which is not being done by Armenian government currently, is to be militarily as powerful as possible, try to resist as much as possible, even if you're very strong, you cannot match Turkey and Azerbaijan militarily. But at least if you're armed with the most modern weapons, drones and missiles and whatever, and you have a good, strong military, you can resist, you can make it more difficult for the invaders or the attackers to do as they wish. So, but Armenia, unfortunately, since the war, well, I mean, already if we were weak during the war that we lost so badly, and because of the war, we lost billions of dollars of weapons, tanks, artillery, et cetera, et cetera. So Armenia is much weaker now than it was before the war or even during the war. And I don't see much improvement in the military in terms of acquiring new weapon systems since the war. So Armenia, again, is in a very weak, much weaker position than it used to be. And unfortunately, the prime minister is forced to cave in and make concessions constantly to Azerbaijan, Turkey, and to whatever Russia demands. And when you read the text of the 30 points of agreement that Pashinyan signed with Putin yesterday, you will see there's a lot of things in there that are in Russia's interest and sort of symbolically also Armenia's interest. But that remains to be seen. And its situation was bad right after the war, but as we see, it's getting worse on a daily basis. The Azeri army has crossed Armenia, not Artsakh, but Armenia's border on May 12, 2021, and they're still sitting there. Next month is May, so it'll be 1 year that the Azeri army is just sitting inside Armenia's border. So they've gone beyond Artsakh into Armenia, and they have no intention of to leave anytime soon. And Armenia is not doing anything about it. Surprisingly to me, the government does not even talk about it, does not even make waves or criticism of that's unacceptable for Azerbaijan army to be inside Armenia's borders. Of course, one should not forget the fact that a year and a half later, after the war, we have still dozens of Armenian prisoners of war who are in Baku, in jails in Baku. Some have been killed in violation of the Geneva Convention. Many of them, if not all of them, have been tortured. Many of them have been taken to court and tried for treason against Azerbaijan. All of these things are violations of the prisoners' rights under international law, and it's going on. And Armenia does not seem to be able to do anything to get its prisoners back. They got some of them back, but there are many more that are there. Even after the European Court of Human Rights dealt with that issue, asked Azerbaijan to release them, they have not. So it's a very bad situation. I'm saddened by talking about it, and I'm sure you all are. But I'll stop here, and if there's any other issues and questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, Harut, one question we received was in the same direction, basically. Is there any chance, because of Ukraine, that those troops would be withdrawn earlier than 5 years, like immediately?
Yeah, well, that's one of my biggest fears, because those of you who remember their history, in 1917, when the Bolshevik Revolution happened in Russia, the Russian Tsarist armies were in Western Armenia, in Kars, Van, and the whole Western Armenia. And Armenians were very happy with that. They got rid of the Ottoman pressure and presence in their cities. But the minute the Bolshevik Revolution broke, the Tsarist army immediately withdrew from Western Armenia when they went back to Russia, and they abandoned the Armenian population to the mercy of the Ottoman Turkish soldiers and the military. And there were a lot of Armenians who were killed as a result. So I and some people think that history may repeat itself. I hope not, but it may repeat itself. And the Russian peacekeeping troops may withdraw, not in 5 years, in 2025, but much earlier, if Russia wants more soldiers to send to Ukraine. Already we see that Putin announced a couple of weeks ago a major draft of young Russians who've reached military age, to try to speed up their training and send them to Ukraine to fight. So in the case of Armenia, we have two things that Russia may have its eye on. One of them is the 1,900 Russian peacekeepers and their equipment that Russia can withdraw at any time if it's in existential threat and trouble. And the other place where Russia can make use of is the Russian military base in Gyumri, where there's a lot of Russian advanced jets and other military equipment and Russian soldiers stationed there for many years. So Russia, if needed, can also withdraw those from Gyumri. If those two things happen, I hope they don't happen, but if they happen, Russia will be Armenia will be completely exposed to Azeri and Turkish military threats.
Based on what you're saying, Harut, I wonder if I should ask the next question, which sounds funny to me. What can be done to have the territory in Artsakh returned to Armenia at this point?
Well, unfortunately, as they say usually about any territory, territories are not given, they're taken. And the way it's taken is taken by military force. So by asking about it, by trying to beg major powers to help Armenia, we're the first Christian nation, etc., that's not going to work. The world only believes in power and force. And if you have the force, you can then enforce your will on others. If you don't, then you make concessions and you follow those who are stronger than you and do what they say. So Armenia can't do much about getting the lands back anytime soon. I cannot say that will be the case forever because we don't know what will happen in the future, in the far future. But for the time being, I don't see any way of getting back what we lost. We may even lose what we have now, the little we have now. And unless Armenia really, as I said earlier, arms itself with the most modern weapons, drones, artillery, missiles, jets, whatever it needs, tanks, and can defend itself at least, if not go on the offensive, but at least defend itself so we don't even lose more. But as things are going, since the war, we are losing more regularly. So there isn't much we can do. The only thing we can do is try to be as prepared diplomatically as possible. But as we know, Armenia, not only now, not only in the last 30 years, but throughout Armenian history, we lack a lot in the area of diplomacy and politics. That's one area we're very weak in. And that's one area that Turkey, ever since the Ottoman Empire days, has been very strong in, playing on a tightrope between two sides, just like it's Turkey doing now between Russia and Ukraine. And we can talk about the details a little later. And Armenia is not. So we're weak militarily, we're weak diplomatically, we're getting weaker economically. And even though Prime Minister announced when he first came to power that by 2050, Armenia's population will grow to be 5 million. But as we see that, forget about the 5 million, but tens of thousands of Armenians left Armenia last year. And as the situation gets worse in Armenia, more Armenians will leave Armenia, unfortunately. I think Derha had a question.
Yeah, I have a question from Arthur Babajanian, and I think he has a problem with his microphone. So I'll ask the question. He's asking if Armenia should Armenian authorities turn to the West and become a US ally?
Well, I know that there's a segment of the population in Armenia and maybe outside of Armenia is thinking in that direction. out of desperation and out of disappointment with Russia's position in the Artsakh conflict. But this is a very serious issue of who to side with. It's really not up to us that what we want is what the other people want. Does the West have any interest in coming to Armenia's defense? My analysis is I don't think so. Maybe some people get excited because of Ukraine and all the outpouring of support to Ukraine. But unfortunately, Armenia is not Ukraine, is not in the center of Europe. And also the other thing that's working in favor of Ukraine in terms of garnering support for Ukraine from the West is there's this tremendous widespread antagonism against Russia, some of it left over from the Soviet Union years, the Cold War mentality. So if you start opposing Russia, a lot of people will join in automatically. But in our case, our battle is with Turkey, which is a NATO ally, ally of the United States, even though there are problems there these days. Also, our problem is Azerbaijan. And most people in the West don't know what Azerbaijan is. And they have barely heard of what Armenia or where Armenia is. So I don't see why the West would be interested in sacrificing its sons and soldiers trying to defend Armenia's borders or Artsakh, especially doing so would mean going against the Turkish and Azeri military. In case of Turkey, Turkey is a NATO ally of the West. So I don't see that's happening. But again, I don't want to come across like I'm anti-West and I'm pro-Russian. I'm not. I don't expect anything Russia to do for us, just like I don't expect the West to do anything for us. And I always say that we should rely on ourselves, on our own power, force, and the sooner we become stronger, the sooner we can be defended. We need to be our own defenders and not expect. Unfortunately, again, Armenia is being naive politically, diplomatically. Throughout our entire history, we always have waited and prayed for an outside force, outside savior to come and save us from this or that empire. And that has never happened in our entire history. No one has come to our rescue. And why should they? Every country pursues its own national interest, what's in their interest and not our interest. So it is time, after thousands of years of history, it is time Armenians realize that the outside force is not going to come to defend us, protect us. Then we need to do whatever we can for ourselves and not rely on anybody else, because if we rely on outsiders, we'll always, as we have been always, disappointed and frustrated, upset, angry, and then we go from friendly gestures to outsiders to antagonism and hostility. So we can't rely on the West. We can't rely on the East. The best policy for Armenia in terms of foreign policy is to have a multilateral relations with all sorts of countries in the world. That includes China, India, Japan, the Middle East, the Arab countries, Iran. That doesn't leave out, of course, Russia, doesn't leave out Western Europe, doesn't leave out United States, Canada, South America. So we have to have as many connections as possible to try to be in a better position to have friends in every corner rather than rely on any one side. And then if one side doesn't come to your rescue, then you're finished.
Mr. Babajanian is asking whether the diaspora can do anything.
Well, diaspora, which is composed of 7 million Armenians, every one of us cares a lot about what's happening in our homeland in Armenia. And we've been doing for the last 30 years whatever we can, mostly in the area of humanitarian aid and social cultural assistance. and financial, which is part of humanitarian aid. But diaspora can only do so much because we have two major obstacles, and I'm not happy that successive Armenian governments in the past and also now, last 4 years under Pashinyan, we have not done anything to remove those two major obstacles from the diaspora. So for the diaspora to really be able to assist Armenia in a material way, substantial way, we need to have, we change the laws in Armenia, change the constitution, which now does not allow diaspora Armenians to come and assume high-level positions in Armenia. We have a lot of very accomplished expert Armenians around the world in different fields. They can bring a lot of assistance to running Armenia properly, professionally, but by law, they're prevented from becoming ministers or running for office, or like parliament, etc. I'm not even talking about prime minister or president. So by law, we're barred from holding a high office in Armenia and being helpful. That's one. Secondly, in order to be able to influence or affect any change in Armenia, you need to have a vote. We don't have a vote. We cannot vote in Armenia. Not only we can't vote, we are diaspora Armenians, but even those who are high instances, who are citizens of Armenia, who live outside of Armenia, when the election comes, they cannot vote. But 20 years or more, once they allow them to vote in their foreign countries at Armenian consulates and embassies, but then that was taken out. So now even Armenian citizens outside of Armenia cannot vote, let alone diaspora Armenians. So there's a much we can do, even though we would like to do. We're all committed. Our hearts are aching for Armenia. We wake up worrying about Armenia. We go to sleep worrying about Armenia. But effectively, there isn't much we can do. I think Derha had a question, Varej. Varej?
Yes,
Derha had a question.
I'm trying to unmute, but
I think he's unmuted now.
okay, there, you go ahead.
Շնորհակալ եմ. Mr. Sassounian, thank you so much. I have one question. 2 days ago, the president of Artsakh, Harut, when he was meeting with Artsakh Armenians in Martuni, he made one announcement. He was telling the Artsakh Armenians there are two ways to protect Artsakh. First was to be united with Armenia, and also he made a comment, it is not possible right now. The second option is to be united with Russia. What is your opinion about this announcement? Thank you.
Well, Varej, am I muted?
I hope not.
Oh, okay, good. Well, yeah, I mean, on paper, those are options, but in reality, they're not really options, because Armenia for 30 years had the opportunity during the previous leaders and today's leaders to do what President of Artsakh was suggesting, to have Artsakh join with Armenia as one of its provinces. But the Armenian government had zero interest in that, unfortunately. And now it's even worse, because to do such an act was much easier when we were in a winning position, when we were victorious. Now that we've lost a lot, we're in a weaker position, much weaker position, and we're not in a position to really do anything like that. And unfortunately, I don't want to get too much into domestic Armenian politics, but I must say honestly that the way things are going, and those of you who followed what the Prime Minister said in Parliament last week, and other government officials have said, that basically it looks like they've given up on Artsakh being either part of Armenia or Artsakh being an independent republic. They've given up on both of these options. And the foreign minister of Armenia and the prime minister have said that for us, Artsakh is not a territorial issue, it's a human rights issue. What they're saying is that Artsakh is part of Azerbaijan, and will go back to Azerbaijan. And all Pashinyan wants to do is try to see if he can make a deal with Aliyev so that Armenians in Artsakh, if they're still there, remain there, they will have the right to use their Armenian language, their religion, and their culture. But living under Azeri rule, which is out of question for many of us. And Artsakh Armenians say that that's unacceptable to us. We're not ready to compromise our autonomy. So the being part of Armenia is out of question. I think it's going to be even much worse than what we have now. Secondly, in terms of joining Russia, I know some people say that, but I'm not very optimistic about that either, for a couple of reasons. One, the Armenians always look at things from their own point of view, from their own interests, which is natural, but they never look at it from the interest of the other side, in this case, the Russian side. Why would Russia be interested in coming and taking over Artsakh or joining with Artsakh and then antagonizing Azerbaijan and Turkey, that Putin is trying to win them over, to befriend them, to have them as allies, not as their enemy, and not to go to war against them, because Azerbaijan has said, even Putin has said, that Artsakh is part of Azerbaijan, and if Russia intends to go and take over Artsakh, that's a declaration of war against both Azerbaijan and Turkey, and I don't think Putin has any interest in going to war with Azerbaijan and Turkey right now. Just the opposite. They're doing everything possible to win them over. There's tremendous trade between Turkey and Russia, military, the S-400 missiles. There are more military things coming up. The Russians are building a nuclear power plant in Turkey, and there's a tremendous amount of trade, tourism between the two. So I don't see Russia being interested in doing anything with Artsakh, whether there's a common country or Russian protection or anything like that. I think what we have now, as long as it lasts, is the best we can hope for. And I'm afraid that even what we have now is going to disappear sometime in the near future.
Harut, Ashot Petrosyan has a question for you.
Yeah, yes, Ashot.
Harut, ուրեմն անգլերեն խոսիմ.
Yeah.
Okay. Ուրեմն, so my question is, you are an expert in this field. How is Armenia involved in the Russia-Ukraine war right now as we speak? And then both mainly materially and also psychologically. And then if this war ends up like Syria for 10 years, because we see a lot of similarities. When 10 years ago the Syria war started, there's a lot of similarities and whatnot, but a lot happened, and not right now Assad is in control. How would Armenia, this is your own perspective, I'm not, it's very difficult to predict. How would Armenia sort of try to live through this long-term war of maybe 5 to 10 years, if that's how long it's going to happen now and then future? Hope it all ends quick. That's what we all hope, but I haven't seen any of these wars in the Middle East end quick. I came from Iran. One of our home almost got hit with a missile from Iraq. So these wars take a long time.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Let me start with the easy part, Armenia's involvement in the war in Ukraine. There have been some Turkish false fake news about Armenia sending soldiers to Ukraine or military aid. None of that is true. The Turks even made up a story about Armenia sent its Russian jets that it bought a few years ago that it turned over to Russia to send to Ukraine. That is also a lie, a fake news. So Armenia, up until now, and I hope it stays that way, is not involved militarily in Ukraine. And the military alliance that Armenia has signed with Russia, the CSTO, only applies if there's any foreign attacks on any of the Armenia or other CSTO member countries. But Russia is not under attack. If Russia came under attack, then the Russians can then call for aid from their military partners, including ally, which will be another disaster for Armenia, both militarily, socially, and also in terms of its standing in the West, whatever that's worth. But so Armenia is not involved, and I don't see much possibility of Armenia getting involved militarily in Ukraine. In terms of the long-term aspects of the war, I agree with you. Last couple of weeks, they were talking about this war going on, not just from the Russian side, but the Western side. We're talking about war going on till at least end of December, which is 8-9 months from now, but maybe much longer, like you said. Maybe it will take years, and that will be really a disaster for everybody involved, not just Armenia. Armenia is right now is a side country; it's an outsider, but it'll be a big disaster for the Ukrainian people. Will be living under bombing for years. It'll be a lot of sacrifice, physical in terms of military and economy for Russia. So it's really bad news. So I agree with you that the sooner it ends, the better for everybody on all sides. And Armenia, of course, is caught in the middle in the agreement that Pashinyan signed with Putin yesterday. And the 30 different clauses, one or two of them talked about the Western sanctions against Russia. And this is a problem for Armenia, of course, even though it's worded very indirectly and softly, but it says about Russia and Armenia joining together to circumvent the Western sanctions. And of course, the West is not going to look too kindly at that kind of wording. And what they called this is that the West may end up putting secondary sanctions on countries that are cooperating with Russia or circumventing the Western sanctions. So Armenia may get hit by that. As we all know publicly, United States government has been putting tremendous pressure on China to prevent China from coming to the aid of Russia, both economically and militarily. And there hasn't much progress in that regard. And China has stayed sort of even-handed to a degree, both in terms of their public statements and in terms of actual aid. So I agree, the sooner this thing ends, the better for everybody. And the small countries always get squeezed in the middle. You know, as they say, when the two elephants fight, the ant is the one that gets stepped on in the middle. So we're the ant in this war. Thank you.
I have one more question. May I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, Varesh. My main concern is if there is such a plan in 2025, when Russia pulls out their troop, we know that Azerbaijan will invade or do something to Artsakh, and we have what, 50,000 or maybe 100,000 Armenians there. Do we have any evacuation plan? What is the plan when 2025 comes? What's your vision? what shall we do? I mean, we can't just let 50 to 100,000 Armenians be slaughtered. We see in Ukraine, 5 million people were just displaced suddenly in a matter of no time. What will happen from your perspective?
Yeah, you expressed a very valid concern. Let me say a couple of things about that. Right now, as we speak, the mentality in Armenia and in Artsakh is that the Russian peacekeepers will be there forever, much longer than 5 years. It's a wishful thinking, in my opinion. They're really taking a big risk with the lives of tens of thousands of Artsakh Armenians. But they're so sure that the Russians will not leave. I'm not so sure. I think the opposite. And what I always tell them when they interview me from Armenia, and they say, "Oh no, Russians will stay," I tell them, "Okay, let's hope they stay. It'll be fine if they stay. But what if they leave?" You also have to think about the alternative, the worst case scenario, not just the optimistic scenario, because like we said, if the Russians leave, those Artsakh Armenians will be slaughtered if they stay in place. They will not enjoy what Pashinyan is talking about, that they will have their linguistic, cultural, religious freedom. But there'll be no freedom of any kind if you're dead. The only good thing that makes me a little optimistic about avoiding a mass scale murder of our Artsakh Armenians in 3.5 years from now or earlier is that the agreement calls for that one of the two sides, if they want to ask to withdraw the Russian troops, they have to do it 6 months in advance of the deadline.
I see.
So if 6 months in advance of the deadline, if Azerbaijan asks Russian troops to leave and the Russians are going to leave, which is what I think they will, then Armenians have 6 months to evacuate Artsakh and save their lives. They can't just sit there for the 6 months to be over and then to be taken over and slaughtered. Now, of course, the other thing which I had mentioned in my article this week, when Pashinyan spoke in Parliament last week, he said that Armenia in 2021 had provided $272 million US dollars of infrastructure aid to Armenians in Artsakh. And I don't want to be impolite, but my question is, if Pashinyan on one hand is saying, let's lower the bar on our expectation of Artsakh independence, and it looks like, and he talks about that Artsakh is not a territory, it's a human rights issue, which means he's giving up on Artsakh. If you're giving up on Artsakh, then why are you spending $272 million? Armenia is a very poor country to spend that kind of money to build infrastructure. And then I said something a little critical, I'm sorry to say, that if you're building infrastructure in Artsakh by spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year for the next 3.5 years, and then if that territory is turned over to Azerbaijan at the end, then basically what you've done is you have built infrastructure for Azerbaijan, not for Armenians. So these are very serious issues, and I don't know what our leaders in Armenia are thinking. I haven't communicated with them recently, except through my articles, but I hope they give some thought about this, of what they're doing and what the outcome will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have I have Sarkis Balkhian, who has a long statement and a few questions. Sarkis, are you here? You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kolanjian, and thank you, Mr. Sassounian, for...
Before you start, Sarkis, happy birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Kolanjian. Thank you, Mr. Sassounian, for this interesting discussion. On the humanitarian side of the issue, I completely agree with you on the two counts that you mentioned. The last point that you mentioned, if we are willing to give up on Artsakh going forward, then what was the point of investing $200+ million from the funds of the All Armenia Fund, as well as the Armenian government, in building up infrastructure in Artsakh? And the second point that you mentioned earlier on, in terms of Armenia's failure to take care of the Ukrainian Armenian refugees coming into the country. Unfortunately, as you know very well, this is a perpetual issue that has been going on for the past 20 years. The Armenian government, starting in 2003 with the Iraq War, and then later on the Syrian conflict, has failed to take care of the displaced Armenians who ended up in Armenia. In fact, as a result of the Ukrainian conflict and the inflow of almost 100,000 Russians coming into Armenia, the displaced Armenians from Syria, Lebanon, as well as Artsakh, who are currently residing in the Republic of Armenia, are now faced with the possibility of being evicted from their homes because landlords are raising the rental costs due to the high demand of housing in Armenia, especially originating from the Russians that are coming into the country. But my question is not so focused on the humanitarian side as much as the political / military side. On multiple occasions, you mentioned that we do not see any realistic steps being taken on this part of the Armenian government to potentially prepare for a defense for Artsakh in 3.5 years' time, or whenever the Russian peacekeeping troops decide to leave Artsakh and leave the 100,000+ Armenians of Artsakh at the risk of being attacked by Azerbaijan. From a purely economic and military and political standpoint, if we fail to build up our defense for 25 years while we had control over 12,000+ km² territory, is it possibly realistic to think that any government, irrespective of whether it was Pashinyan in place right now or any other political power in place in Armenia, can they build up the militaries enough to potentially wage a defense of Artsakh whenever the Russian peacekeepers decide to leave, from a financial and military standpoint? And my second point is, with the other issue that you mentioned in terms of out-migration from Armenia, is there a realistic hope for Armenia as a country going forward in this region? And the realistic hope, what is it based on?
Sorry, Sarkis, hope for what? What?
Hope towards the future, meaning.
Oh, in general?
Yeah, in general, as a country.
Okay. In terms of Armenia strengthening your first question, itself militarily, yes, I think I agree with you. We've done a very poor job becoming a powerful military. As in political science, they call that a garrison state, which is what Israel has done, surrounded by 18 Arab countries. And you need to take all actions and all options to make yourself as impenetrable as possible, to defend yourself. Israel has what is called an Iron Dome defense against missiles from outside. We need to think about that. There's nothing Armenians cannot do if Armenians are united, 3 million in Armenia and 7 million outside. We have so many brilliant scientists, genius minds in all fields and industries. Armenians can do all sorts of things, but we just haven't been organized. We haven't been united. There's been no entity in the diaspora or in Armenia. In Armenia, we have a government that's supposed to do this, and the government hasn't done this, neither in the past nor currently. So they're just overwhelmed with all the multitude of problems on a daily basis to be able to sit and for a second think straight and see what are the big priorities to save the nation. Armenia is under existential threat these days. So we can't just worry about arresting protesters in the street, shutting down somebody used a swear word and throwing them in jail. Those are all very minor things. Those things don't threaten Armenia's existence. We are under threat of being run over and taken over and extinguished. So if the Armenian leadership, with the assistance of diaspora, has a plan to strengthen Armenia militarily, I think it's possible. Of course, we're not going to be a superpower because we're a small country, but at least arm yourself, protect yourself as much as possible to discourage the enemy trying to just come in and walk in. Because right now they're just walking in and with no resistance. And Armenian soldiers on the border are told, don't shoot back. Because Pashinyan says if you shoot back, that will aggravate the situation. So that's a invitation for the enemy to come in, knowing that they're not going to meet any resistance. So let's be as strong as realistically possible. The option is not doing nothing, because that's a disaster, nor we can be a superpower. So something realistic we can do. In terms of the hope for the future, well, this is very difficult for me to say, but we can all say very nice things about ourselves, about Armenia, that Armenia is here forever, and Armenia is a great country. We're God's children on earth, and we can say also wonderful things, and we have poems, we have songs praising ourselves. But if we are a little more realistic, we should admit that we're in very bad shape. Our situation is getting worse on a daily basis. The future looks bleak. Now, instead of giving up, we should take this opportunity, trying to see how we can strengthen ourselves, how we can unite all of us together, regardless of our differences, what we can do to protect our homeland. Because once we lose what we have, I don't think we're going to be able to get it back anytime soon, as we see what happened in 1920. And we don't know. And if we lose it again, we may never get it back. But so let's not take a chance to see if we're going to get it back or not. Let's prevent from that happening. And let's not fool ourselves that everything is okay. Every time I criticize the government, I'm being told by Armenians, why are you criticizing them? Is this the right thing to do at this difficult time? And my answer is, if you see your homeland going downhill, and if you just keep your mouth shut and close your eyes, you're not doing any favors to your homeland. You have to speak up, and you have to see what you can do, what others can do. You have to talk, you have to cooperate with others and see what can be done. You can't just keep quiet and when you see things are going wrong. So I don't want to discourage anybody, but we need to really wake up and not wait for anybody from outside to come our rescue. It's not going to happen. To see what we can do for ourselves.
Harut, there are a lot of questions, but I want to ask something, because you had mentioned a poll in Armenia where you had mentioned that more Armenians feel that the country is going in the wrong direction. So, I mean, instead of giving up, what can we do? I mean, some people are asking the question, should we just give up claims on Artsakh and move on? Or is there another solution? If the people in Armenia think the country is going in the wrong direction, and people in the diaspora think something is weird, so what's the next step?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. What the poll indicated, that it was like a trend. It wasn't just a one-time a frozen image. When Pashinyan first came to power 4 years ago, he had tremendous outpouring of support from Armenia and from diaspora. I would say his support was about 80% back then. Now, since then, it had dropped and keeps dropping. Last year's elections, he got 54% of those who voted. After the election, there was is the poll that you were referring to. It showed that it dropped to, I think it was 37%. And my analysis is that it keeps dropping as things are getting worse, situation getting worse in Armenia. And now, of course, just removing Pashinyan is not going to be the solution to all the problems. No matter who comes after him, they're going to face the same problems. My only hope is, maybe I'm fooling myself, but my only hope is that if whoever comes, forget about the former leaders, the current leader, I'm talking about the fresh blood, new people. And if they're competent and capable of running a country with so many problems, even if they cannot solve all the problems with Artsakh and whatever, at least they will make sure that it doesn't get any worse on a daily basis, which will be a positive for us, that if we don't allow it to get worse than it is. So we should not give up, because if you give up, then you lose everything. Of course, it's easy to say, oh, Artsakh is the problem, let's get rid of Artsakh. Let's give up our dreams and hopes for Western Armenia because Turks will never give the land back. It's always easy to give up on something. So by giving up, that's the easy part. The difficult part is, what is it that you can do to organize yourself, to strengthen yourself, to unite with each other, so that we can, little by little, have a plan of action before we do anything, and then step by step, over a long term, trying to improve the situation.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Babajanian is not the only person saying, why not build better positive relationship with both Turkey and Azerbaijan and move on like the Georgians have done?
Well, Georgians don't have the problem that we have with Turkey and Azerbaijan. And Georgia is not doing that well either, because it's overrun by Turkish economy, Turkish business. They've taken over practically various important aspects of the Georgian economy. And Georgia, except for very minor border demarcation issue with Azerbaijan, they don't have a war with Azerbaijan the way we do. And in terms of getting along, well, it's easy to say get along, and that's what the government is trying to do. But when you're weak and the enemy knows how weak you are, the enemy will never say, okay, you've made enough concessions, we're satisfied, we're not going to ask any more from you. They're going to keep pushing and asking for more. The more you give up, the more they're going to ask for. So that's really a no solution to our problem. And when you have two enemies who not only are enemies historically going back to a century, but they're enemies as recently as 2020, and they're enemies right now, it's hard to get along with those enemies. The enemy wants to wipe you out. We're not opposed to having normal relationship with them, but do they want to have a normal relationship with us is the question. But we're not the ones who are trying to wipe them out. They're the ones who are trying to wipe us out. So it's easy to say, give up this, give up that, but will that make the situation any better, or will make it worse? I think Viken keeps raising his hand. Brej?
Viken, can you unmute?
And it's saying the host is not alive.
Yeah.
You're allowed.
Yeah, you're in.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sassounian, for the informative presentation. My question concerns the military aid that the United States so generously offers to Azerbaijan. And right when President Biden was recognizing the Armenian Genocide, in the meantime, the United States was extending military aid to Azerbaijan, which consequences of which much of military was used in that war that devastated Armenia. And in the new budget, evidently there's additional military aid to Azerbaijan. Despite the influence of Armenian community in the United States, I'm surprised that we can't influence the American policy to be favorable for Armenia. We are even failing in this domain. Do you agree with me?
I heard most of what you said. It was breaking up a little bit, but I heard you were talking about the U.S. assistance and Biden. Yes, your concern is valid. We have a serious problem. In spite of our lobbying efforts in Washington, I've been a supporter of Biden for the last 30 years, but I'm very disappointed with him, to be honest. I don't care about what side of U.S. politics we're on.
I'm a supporter myself.
Yeah, but, he on one hand he recognized the genocide, and then he turned around the next day, and he removed the 907, the banning aid to Azerbaijan, and again right now as we speak, the Biden has cut down the aid to Armenia and eliminated the aid to Artsakh. So we're fighting back through our friends in Congress, trying to increase it, because this happens also in the past in previous administrations, where the White House gives a very limited amount of aid to Armenia, and then the Congress raises the amount. So let's hope that our efforts again results in the same manner, that the aid amount is increased by Congress in spite of the administration's proposal. But we are not the most powerful lobby in the United States or the world. We're not the most powerful country in the world. We are what we are, but we can't give up. We can't say we're too small, we can't do anything. If we give up, then you give up on everything. So we need to struggle, and we need to work hard, trying to get as many things for our homeland, to protect our homeland as possible. That's all we can do. I know our lobbyists in Washington are working very hard, reaching out to members of Congress. They're asking the Armenian community to send emails to their representatives to urge them to raise the amount of money that Congress allocates every year. So just keep up the good fight. That's all I can say.
Vroir, can you unmute?
There you go. Hello, everyone. This is Harut. And there's always been a question that's bothered me all along in the past 2 years in particular. Why is it that the Armenians in Armenia, that is, still support Pashinyan, and day after day we have lots of protests, lots of everything, we cannot move any of the Armenians to join this movement? And then the second part of the question I had is, even if we did, if we don't have anyone in place to take over, what is it that we're fighting for at this point, instead of trying to actually strengthen or involve the diaspora Armenians who are well suited to be part of this political agenda?
Okay, thank you. In terms of the first part of your question, why are the Armenians population keep supporting Pashinyan? Well, we've discussed this many times. There was so much hatred and resentment for the last 25 or so years of the previous leaders, that the people were just completely fed up with living in the conditions they were living in, and seeing that the government doesn't really care about their welfare. And those who can leave by large numbers left, but those who were left behind, they were completely disengaged with anything and disgusted. So when Pashinyan came along and promised the moon, and that he's gonna be the people's leader, he's gonna let the people make decisions for the country, not him, they immediately followed him. As I said before, Armenians always look for somebody to save them. And if it's not from outside, if somebody from inside gives them a big promise that I'm going to save you, you're going to live in paradise, and you're going to have a job, you're going to have an income, you're going to feed your family, take care of them, go on vacation. These poor people, what can they do? They're regular people. They're not experts on politics, and they just believe them and follow them. They half of it because of that, and the other half because they hated the previous one so much that they voted for half of them for Pashinyan and half of them against the previous leaders. And Pashinyan was the beneficiary of that. But as time passes and the war loss and the economy and all that, more and more people are getting disenchanted. They're abandoning Pashinyan. Even in the June 2020 election, we saw that the faction led by Kocharyan got, I think, 21%, and which was surprising on the surface, because Kocharyan was a dead man. He was a former leader, a loser. There were so many problems with him. He was being tried for all sorts of corruption, and there was hardly anybody supporting him in the Armenian public. But I think what happened is why he got. Yeah, I mean, I expected him to get like 1 or 2% his faction, but they got 21%. I think most of the 21% came from those who left Pashinyan and went back to somebody else that they knew before, and even if they didn't like the one before. But so this is when there's an election in Armenia, like last time, but some people are voted because they like Pashinyan. Some people voted for Pashinyan because they don't like the previous ones, and then some people voted for Kocharyan's people because they don't like Pashinyan. So those liking and dislike works both ways, and that's why people keep supporting him. But as I said, I think his support, I'm trying to be as objective as possible, and despite my biases, but I think his support is getting less and less as we go along. Sorry, Varud, what was the second part of your question?
Right.
Is he muted?
Nope.
Varud, can you hear us?
Okay, here we go. The second
Yeah.
part of my question has to do where, why aren't we waking up, or the government waking up and saying, okay, we need the support, let's keep the government we have, but let's allow diaspora, politicians, or anyone else that can help come join the fight with us. They're willing, they're able, but they're not allowed. When is this going to change?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Here's the problem. What you just said is we all are saying the same thing, and surprisingly, not only us saying it, even Pashinyan is saying the same thing. He's saying we should allow the diaspora Armenians to come in. We need to change our laws, and for them to come and help us assume high positions. We should bring experts from diaspora. But the shocking or the surprising thing is that it's one thing to talk about it. You and I can talk about it, but we have no power to change anything. But Pashinyan is the ultimate leader in the country. He's the all-powerful prime minister. He has the majority in parliament, so he can change any law he wants. He can submit in the morning, and in the afternoon it will be done. It will be approved by majority in parliament. So he's talked about it, but hasn't done anything about it, like a lot of other things that we see. He hasn't done anything about it, but talked about it, talks about the diaspora. But the other problem the Pashinyan has is he doesn't listen to anybody's advice. Not only he doesn't do what he says himself, but he also doesn't benefit, is not willing to benefit from anybody's advice. When people ask me, shouldn't the diaspora have a say in Armenia? I say, yeah, of course. But I say, forget the diaspora having a say in Armenia. Even Pashinyan's own appointed ministers, like the foreign ministers, the deputy prime ministers, the majority in parliament, the president, all of these people are in Pashinyan's circle people. He doesn't listen to any of them. No matter what they say, he doesn't listen to. he is a one-man show, one-man rule. He makes all the decisions, and he doesn't know how to run a country. So that's why we are in the shape we are. Now, as good Armenians that we all are, we're always willing and ready to come to the rescue of our homeland and do everything we can to help. But if they don't let you, by law, you're not allowed to. And then even if you give advice, which doesn't require a position, we can give advice, but nobody's interested in Armenia listening to your advice. Your hands are tied. There isn't much you can do. That's the situation we're in.
I wonder if Sarkis Balkhian would like to say a couple of words, because he's one person who left the diaspora almost 10 years ago to go back and live in Yerevan. And he's feeling all this frustration on his skin. Maybe he can share with us if there are any hopes with an incompetent government and how that can change.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kolanjan. Yes, there's a lot of frustration on my end because on 2 occasions I went back to Armenia in 2010 from Syria, and then in 2017 from the US back to Armenia. In terms of hope, I think the one thing we need to be very realistic about, and I've been saying this since November 10, 2020, since the next day of the war in Artsakh, the Russians did not move into Artsakh in order to rescue the Armenians, because first of all, as everyone is aware, there were no civilian population in Artsakh left by November 9 of 2020. So the Russians went into Artsakh in order to use Artsakh as a rook on their chessboard. So to pin our hopes on Russia to salvage the situation in Artsakh is, in my opinion, a hoax, because the Russians are only there to use Artsakh for their own national interests, whether that be in Ukraine or even as far away as the Idlib province in Syria. This is something I've been repeating for almost 2 years now. So I don't see a future for Artsakh as an entity. But in terms of Armenia, I think we need to be very realistic in terms of what the expectations are, because when it comes to our defense and our military, I agree with Mr. Sassounian that Israel, surrounded by not only 16 Arab countries, but 20 odd Muslim countries, has been able to protect itself. But we do not have the financial resources, nor do we have a United States or Europe that is going to fund our military industrial complex the same way they funded the Israeli military over the last, since 1948. So we need to be very realistic in terms of what we can demand and expect and call for from our 2 enemy states, Azerbaijan and Turkey. But in order to have hope in Armenia, there has to be, at least on the domestic level, some form of justice. And it is only just that the people and the authors and protagonists of Armenia's recent history, 30 years since independence, whether it's Bedrosian, Kocharian, Sarkisian, or at this point, Pashinyan, they all feel ashamed of their failures, whether it's on economic policies, corruption, lack of human rights, or the failure in Artsakh. And they just step aside, get out of political landscape in Armenia, and allow new powers in Armenia to come forward. Without those 4 protagonists and authors of our recent history getting kicked out of the political landscape, I really do not see, unfortunately, as someone who lives in Yerevan, I really do not see a future for Armenia as a state, as a viable state that can, not today, but in 100 years' time, let's say, recover our national lands and our historic homelands, whether it be in Western Armenia or in Artsakh. But that's my perspective.
Wow. Who wants to follow that one? Any comment, Harut?
No, thank you, Sarkis, for your very wise words.
Someone is saying Sarkis for the Prime Minister of Armenia.
Okay.
Any more questions? Yeah, I have Ashot.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have to unmute.
I did. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Sarkis, for participation and your comment. But let's do a little bit of a role playing, so at least we can have a positive note. And I play this role with Harut. Let's say I'm the Russian bear sitting there looking at the situation. I have very few friends left. Okay, and there's this poor, whatever Armenian country, a nation that's there, that no matter what they do, they are dependent on me. So depending on the politics of the region goes, there are two things that me as the Russian bear do not want to happen. One, destruction of Armenia. So the probability that Armenia will be wiped out is very, very minimal. There is historical, religious, not language, but connection there. The second thing, you said something very important, that the Russians didn't go to Artsakh to help the Artsakhs. They went there for their own self-interest. I wouldn't be that cynical, but I would say that's the only hope that we have. That something is going to go wrong with Azerbaijan, and there's a lot of things going wrong with Azerbaijan. Economy is not the only thing. Look, Putin destroyed Russia's economy for his own nationalistic interests, for whatever policies that were done wrong in the past. He wants to unify Belarus and Ukraine with Russia, whatever. So that angle is also a possibility, low possibility, that the Russian bear, our Russian friends, our Russian allies may say, hey, look, I want an ally in Caucasia, Transcaucasia. Armenia is our only ally, and Artsakh is also part of Armenia. It is a possible scenario. It's an unlikely scenario. But let's be realistic. Turkey and Azerbaijan cannot do anything against that demand. Russia already allowed its own economy to collapse, but they are bouncing back, and they will bounce back. I mean, Soviet economy had no connection or no dependency on the West. That's where they are going right now. Instead of Airbus and instead of Boeing, they're going to build Tupolevs and Ilyushins. So yes, situation doesn't look good, and I agree with that, but that's 99%. There is a 1% hope, and I agree with Harut that we have a 6-month window to run away. You know, when 2025 Artsakh comes to an end, but let's not give up all hope. So that's it. At least I want to add a positive note to what Mr. Sarkis said. So Artsakh is not over. That's what I'm saying. Artsakh is not over. And Armenia is there to be forever.
Can I just ask a question to Mr. Ashod and especially Mr. Sassounian?
We were waiting for your response.
Not a response, it's more of a question, because since the independence of the Republic of Armenia and the beginning of the Karabagh movement in 1988, never in that 30-year plus window has Russia ever stated that Artsakh is a part of Armenia. I think this is the one place where Armenians haven't been able to distinguish or acknowledge the limitations of that international law puts on our claim for Artsakh, because Levon Bedrosian, from the beginning of the movement, framed it as a matter of self-determination of a people and the right of people for self-determination, as opposed to a conflict over land. So we formulated our claims for Artsakh as a human right issue, meaning Armenians need to live under Armenian authority or independent from Azeri rule because they would risk annihilation under Azeri rule, Turkish rule. From the beginning, we formulated our claim in the wrong manner, as opposed to claiming it as a territory of the, or a part of the Republic of Armenia. And up until today, no country in the world, not Russia, not the United States, not France, no country in the world, including Armenia, by the way, has recognized Artsakh as an independent state, nor did Armenia have the audacity and courage to unite Artsakh with Armenia during this previous war, which I think would have been an extremely risky move that may or may not have paid off through a Russian intervention during the 44-day war. So I think we need to be very honest with ourselves when we say Armenia and then we say Artsakh. Artsakh, according to everyone, including the Republic of Armenia, not just this administration, but every administration, is not a part of Armenia. So Russia will protect Armenia, in my opinion, when everything goes to hell, and because it needs its interest to be defended in the South Caucasus, but Artsakh is not part of that equation for the Russians, in my opinion.
It is absolutely correct, but let me add a little point in there. It's all about land grab. It's all about Russia doesn't have friends there. They already took away 20% of Georgia. The Azeris have changed their alphabet. That's a major insult to the Russians. Yes, economy plays an important role, but Turkey was an arch enemy of Russia for 300 years. The Turks, the Persians, and the Azeris were part of Persia, were already fighting. It's exactly as you said. There's an element, and I want to punish Azerbaijan for what they have done in the past and for mistakes that they may do into the future. So I, as the Russia or the Russian bear, have two options. Let Artsakh go away, or it's not a trivial piece of land. Artsakh's territory, Harut, please correct me, is half the territory of Armenia. It's not a small piece of land. I am looking for allies. I am looking for somebody who's totally loyal to me. I have power. I'm twice the size of the United States, the biggest gas and oil reserves in the world, and don't even pay attention to all these sanctions and stuff like that. So at some point, I'm going to be upset, just like they got upset with Ukraine. I still can't figure out why they invaded Ukraine. I'm going to do the same thing with Artsakh. What is it that makes you think that I would not?
Well, one indication is related to Ukraine. If you remember, Russia signed a bilateral agreement with Azerbaijan, a security agreement with Azerbaijan a few days leading up to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where in itself, Putin secured his southern border to tame Azerbaijani potential involvement in the conflict with Ukraine or anti-Russian policies towards in the context of the Ukrainian conflict. So I think Russia knows how to play with Armenia, Artsakh, and Azerbaijan, and we're not in a position to pin our hopes on neither Russia or anybody else when it comes to Artsakh specifically. I think Armenia is a completely different case where it's a sovereign country, even though, I mean, Ukraine was a sovereign country, but Russia invaded it. And it seems like because it's a superpower, no one is willing to directly intervene against Russia in the context of Ukraine. But in the context of Armenia, I do believe Russia will decide to protect us from Turkish and Azerbaijani invasions due to its own interests. But in the context of Artsakh, and I'll also leave it to Mr. Sassounian, I think it's a very different calculation that the Russians have. And I don't think we need to pin our hopes on Russia. In essence, what I'm saying, unfortunately, is, as I have been saying for the last year and a half, Artsakh is gone, in my opinion. And we are at fault more than anyone else, but that's my perspective.
Yeah,
Should we take one last question, Harut, before you conclude?
yeah, I think Serge Tomasian has his hands up for a long time.
Exactly. I unmuted him already. Serge, can you please go ahead?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Harut. I did join late, so I apologize for that. So I don't have the benefit of what transpired before I came on. But I just want to ask a couple of observations that I've made. I've made it on social media, and I'm going to reiterate. Number one is Pashinyan, as the leader of Armenia. He lost the war. He should have lost the confidence of the Armenian people. And right or wrong, it doesn't really matter if it's entirely his fault or partially his fault. The point is, he was the leader at the time. And so he was in a compromised position post-war to negotiate from any position of strength. So that just one observation. But second thing is, I hear a lot about Russia. And one of the speakers hit it right on the nose. Russia and Putin will always do what's in their best interests. And if it happens to benefit Armenia, that will be an unintended benefit to Armenia. But I don't think that is what motivates the Russians. What I don't understand, Harut, and yes, people have mentioned Israel and other countries that have, that have risen and defended themselves against much greater odds, albeit with the support of the West. But what I don't understand, Harut, Armenia has had time, has had resources from the diaspora to build up its strength, to anticipate that down the road there was going to be a reckoning with Azerbaijan, a reckoning with even Turkey through the surrogate Azerbaijan. They had time to anticipate this was going to happen, and they had time to build up. And what is the lesson to be learned? Armenia can't be a vassal state and dependent on big brothers. Armenia has to strengthen itself internally and anticipate external threats. But what is the mindset that has to be in place, Harut, you think, to change that mentality, not to look to big brother, but to build oneself up internally as a nation, and then to gain the respect of the outside world and to pursue all economic, legal, and other avenues to get the support of the world? Your thoughts, Harut, to change that mindset?
Okay, thank you, Serge. Let me give you my brief analysis about the mindset up until now, from the day of independence. Armenia's leaders, Armenia's population, and even the diaspora, we all had the following mindset for 30 years until this war, that Armenians were God's gift to humanity on this planet. We're a great nation. We're the first Christian nation. We've accomplished tremendous things throughout our history. We are a very strong country. We are a victorious country over Azerbaijan and Artsakh. And we thought extremely highly of ourselves. I should say that we were very arrogant about ourselves. And at the same time, when it came to our enemies, Azerbaijan and Turkey, we constantly said, and we are raised like that from our parents and grandparents, that starting from the genocide time, that the Turks are criminals, they're bloodthirsty, and they're ignorant, they're backward people. They're not as civilized and advanced as Armenians are, as we are. And when it came to Azerbaijan, because we defeated them in the 1990s and liberated Artsakh, we thought of Azerbaijan as a bunch of losers, a bunch of cowards. We even said that they don't know how to fight. They don't dare to fight us. And if they ever even think about fighting us, we will go in and take over Azerbaijan, not just Artsakh. We'll go all the way to Baku. And so if you have that kind of a mentality, which is so divorced of reality, then you're never going to think about protecting yourself, defending yourself. You're going to think we're indestructible, that the enemy is just a bunch of idiots, losers, cowards, and nothing will ever happen to us. They won't even dare to attack us. And now, while we were saying these crazy things to ourselves, to fool ourselves, let's now turn to what the enemy was saying. Erdogan, both the current, not Erdogan, I'm sorry, Aliyev, both the current President Aliyev and his father before him, Haydar Aliyev, they 1,000 times in 30 years, they said the following statement. They said that these lands, Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan. This is our land. Now, either you give it back to us by negotiation, which we tried through the Minsk group, or if you don't, you keep prolonging this and you keep hoping that we would go away. We're not. We're going to attack and take it back by force. So they said this very seriously, repeatedly, hundreds of times over 30 years. But God forbid we ever listened to them. We never believed them. We laughed at them. We belittled them. We treated them like idiots. While we were sort of bragging ourselves and so proud of our accomplishments and not doing much about it, the Azeris, who we thought they're stupid, it turns out they're not stupid, they're very smart. They spent all these years preparing themselves militarily. They got the oil, they got the billions of petrodollars. They bribed everybody in the different countries, especially in Europe and the US and Russia. And they got the latest military, the most advanced armaments. They got Turkey, which was a little standoffish at the beginning from Azerbaijan years ago. And Turkey came fully on board with Azerbaijan. And they trained the Azeri military. They armed with drones and other F-16 jets, etc. On top of that, they brought several thousand Islamist jihadis from Syria, terrorists, to fight with them or on their behalf. And then one day, when they thought that they're ready and they got the best military advice from Turkey, they attacked and they got what they planned while we were just sitting and making up stories about our weak and cowardly enemy. So that's the mentality so far that got us where we are. Now, just like the Azeris were devastated after the 90s war and they regrouped, they rearmed themselves, they formed coalition with Turkey and the jihadists, etc. So they bounced back. Now it remains to be seen if Armenians who think we're so intelligent, so great, can we also bounce back from this terrible defeat and feel that we are once again confident, sure of ourselves, that we can fight back, we can regroup, we can rearm ourselves, we can be stronger again. That remains to be seen. Right now, we're all in a funk, in a depression. We're all sort of not physically crying, but we're crying in our hearts. And we don't know where to turn. There's a complete, total malaise or carelessness throughout the entire Armenian world, both in Armenia and the diaspora. We're watching what's happening, but nobody's lifting a finger. Everybody's quiet because they're so disappointed and they're distraught over what happened. They don't know what to do. So it remains to be seen if we are a nation that are we just a bunch of talkers, big talkers that we are, or we can also, when the as they say in Armenian, when the knife reaches the bone, do we wake up finally and from our coma and try to regroup, become stronger, unite, and defend our homeland and make it more difficult for our enemies to attack us? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'm not that intelligent to forecast the future. But I, as an Armenian, caring about our homeland, I hope so. And but even if we do, it's going to take a very long time. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
Thank you, Harut, for this wonderful conclusion. I think everybody enjoyed all the almost 2 hours that you allocated today from your precious time. I also thank everybody who participated, and it looks like everybody wants to stay in touch. And if you want us to send you a copy of the recording, just leave your email so that we do that. For my favorite book for April 24 is actually Harut's Documents and Declarations. And I don't know if you guys know this book. Can you see it? It's a very concise book about the Armenian genocide with all the documents and declarations since 1915 till 2015. So Harut told me that if anybody wants a copy, just send an email and we'll send you a copy free of charge. And I mean, free of mailing cost. So thank you very much, guys. And I hope we can do this thing again. Harut, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.